With Palworld being a new game, there isn't many facts out there. So to help you guys out, here's 137 facts for 137 pals. Starting off at the bottom of the list, we're going to be talking about Jet Dragon, which happens to be the only legendary pal that can actually use weapons. So when you equip them with a saddle and ride him, you can actually use homing missiles. But to top it off, he's also the fastest flying pal. His speed measures in at 3,300, which is more than double that of the second fastest flying pal. But enough of Jet Dragon, let's move on to Frostallion Noct. Frostallion Noct is actually the only legendary variant of a pal, which is Frostallion. Both Frostallion and Frostallion Noct are actually tied at second place for the fastest pals. And if you're attempting to catch a Jet Dragon, Frostallion is actually a perfect pal to use. This is because Frostallion is an ice type, which counters Jet Dragon perfectly. Next up, we'll be talking about the next legendary pal, Necromus. He's pretty much just the evil counterpart to Palladius. However, with his evilness comes a lot of strength. Palladius is actually ranked number 1 in base attack damage. He's also ranked number 7 for base HP and base defense, which makes perfect sense as to why he's ranked an SS tier in combat. But if you thought I was done there, you would be mistaken. This is because Necromus, although being a dark type pal, unlocks a ground move that clocks in at 150 power. But let's move on from the evil counterpart and start talking about Palladius. And although Necromus is way stronger when it comes to strength, Palladius is way stronger when it comes to defense. Palladius has the highest base defense of any pal in the game. And to follow it up, he also has the ability to triple jump when ridden, which makes it very great for evading shots in combat. You also have a 1 in 2 chance of getting Palladius out of a huge common egg, so be on the lookout. Now let's move on from the legendaries and talk about some more pals, the first one being Shadowbeak. Although Shadowbeak is a great pal in many different ways, one thing that definitely stands out is the drops that it has. Not only is it one of 2 pals that drops carbon fiber, but it's also one of 3 pals that drops innovative technical manuals. Not only that, but it can also drop pal metal ingots, which are used for endgame equipment. Now we'll be moving on to Orzhirk. If you need a lightning pal for combat, this is definitely one to consider. Not only is Orzhirk ranked SS tier in combat, but it is also ranked SS tier as a base pal. What makes it such a good electrical pal for combat is the fact that it unlocks 3 different electrical moves, all of which do 100 power or more. For our next pal on the list, we have Phalaris. He is a great pal to use when grinding items that are dropped from ice pals. This is because when Phalaris is active, he actually gives an increased drop item boost onto any ice pal that you kill. So if you're trying to grind for that legendary schematic that Frostallion drops, this is definitely a pal to consider using. And while we're still on the subject of abilities, let's move on to Leyline Noct. It has an ability called Goddess of the Tranquil Light. This ability heals the player for a set amount depending on the level of Leyline Noct while it's activated. Similarly to Leyline Noct, Leyline also has a healing ability that you can use while it's active. And if you want to acquire Leyline through breeding, you can breed Mossanda and Patalia, which is relatively easy mid-game. Next up, we have the big fuzzy lightning bolt, Grisbolt. If you can acquire one of these, it's actually a great pal to use for breeding mid-game. He can be used to breed pals like Mossanda Lux, Orzhirk, Warsect, Pyron, Germantide, and even Astagon. Moving on, we have one of my favorite pals, Suzaku Aqua. This pal is really good all around, but one thing that stands out is the moves that it obtains. It actually obtains an ice move that does 130 power, as well as a water move that does 150 power. As for its original counterpart Suzaku, it has the ability of dropping a legendary pump action shotgun if you kill or capture the alpha version of it. Next up on the list, we're going to be talking about Germantide and Germantide Ignis. Germantide is an extremely strong pal, being ranked A tier as a mount, SS tier in combat, and S tier as a base pal. And although it is the original Germantide, it actually cannot be used to breed Germantide Ignis. Even though Germantide is very strong, Germantide Ignis definitely tops it. Ignis is currently the only pal that is ranked number 1 in combat in 2 different element groups. Apart from that, Germantide Ignis is the only pal with Kindling level 4. Going on to pal number 100 in the pal deck, we have Anubis. Anubis has the highest base attack of any non-legendary pal. It's also rated SS tier as a base pal, and it's extremely easy to get early game through certain breeding methods. Thank you guys so much for making it this far out. If you're enjoying, please remember to like and subscribe, or leave a comment down below as to what I could do next time. With that out of the way, let's talk about Mana Sting. If you're trying to obtain a Mana Sting, a good way to do it is getting a huge dark egg. You have a 1 in 5 chance of getting him out of that egg. Worst case scenario, you get another pal that comes out of that egg, but that's definitely not a bad thing, counting that you can get Shadowbeak, Leyline Noct, Necromus, or even Frostallion Noct. Up next, we'll be talking about Estegon. If you're trying to locate the Alpha Estegon, he can be located at the destroyed mineshaft in the volcanic region. If you do kill or capture the Alpha, it has a chance of dropping palmetal ingots, pure quartz, as well as a legendary heat-resistant refined metal armor schematic. Woo, that's a long one. Okay, now let's talk about Helsifier. Helsifier is one of the 4 pals ranked SS tier as a base pal. This is due to its amazing hauling abilities. Its hauling abilities are actually really influenced by its passive skill, as well as it being a flying type, making it really easy for it to traverse around the base. Now my boy Blazemut. This pal is great to have at the base, especially for its kindling abilities and its mining abilities. Not only is it level 3 in kindling and level 4 in mining, but it also can have a 110% increase to work speed with all of its passive skills. Another thing to note is that if you kill the Alpha Blazemut, it has a chance of dropping a legendary assault rifle schematic. Okay, let's move on to Quivern. He's a great pal to have early game, especially because he spawns in at an Alpha level 23. He's also really strong, and he also naturally unlocks 4 different element type moves. The moves he unlocks are Fire, Water, Grass, and Dragon. The strongest of which is Dragon with 150 power, and the weakest is Fire with 45 power. Now let's move on from the stats and start talking about a fun fact. This one's going to be regarding Felbat. Felbat is one of the 5 dungeon exclusive pals in the game. Of those 5, he is the only pal that has an alpha variant on the map. It's not that good of a pal, but it's definitely a pal you should try to catch, just for fun. Plus, it comes with the ability Lifesteal, so why not? Now we're stuck with Fanglope, and you might be too if you try to find yourself a common egg. Yes, a common egg. Fanglope is one of the pals that actually spawns from a common egg, and in my opinion, it's the best pal you can get from an ordinary, basic, common egg. And since we're still on the subject about eggs, I think it is a great time to talk about Warsect. Warsect has a 50% chance of being spawned from a huge rocky egg, and the other 50% goes to Anubis, so it is definitely an egg to try to find. Straying away from eggs and talking about the giant grass ball and the giant snowball, we'll be talking about Wumpo and Wumpo Botan. And there's a lot to say about these pals, but I'm going to try to keep this short. And to sum it up, both of these pals actually have the exact same amount of carrying capacity increase to a player, which is 120 and the highest in the game. And a special thing about Wumpo Botan is actually its name, if you haven't noticed. Now the last part of his name is Botan. This means that Wumpo Botan is the only pal that is a grass type variant in the entire game. So to help you understand, out of 137 pals in the game, there's only 1 pal that is a grass variant. Next up, we have another duo, Mamorist and Mamorist Christ. Both of these are actually tied in first place for highest base HP per level of any pal. But if you're trying to catch these pals, I do not recommend you bring any pal or megaspheres. I don't even recommend you bring gigaspheres because most likely you're going to need a lot of those, so I would recommend bringing hyperspheres. Even with hyperspheres though, it's still going to be a little bit of a hard catch because the rarity for them is a 9 out of 10 catch rate. Moving on to our third duo, but not our last one, we have King Paka and King Paka Christ. First off, let's talk about King Paka. So if you remember one of our earlier facts about Palladius, it was that he could be obtained from an egg. And the probability to obtain him was 50%. Now the other 50% actually goes to none other than King Paka. So what I'm basically telling you is, if you have a huge common egg and you get a King Paka, I'm so sorry for you. But if you do get one and now you're trying to obtain the King Paka Christ, there's good news. Now although these pals do not spawn anywhere on the map, they do spawn in the Forgotten Mineshaft. This mineshaft is actually located on the Snowy Mountain region, so you can head down there and get yourself one after you have King Paka. Anyways, onto our fourth duo in a row, we have Reptyro and Reptyro Christ. Starting off with Reptyro, there isn't anything too special about him. He's more of a filler pal. However, he is a decent pal to have for combat. He's ranked at 22 in HP, 27 in attack, and 7 in defense. So if you have him mid-game, it's definitely a decent pal. Anyways, with Reptyro Christ, he also isn't that much of a good pal. However, he does have one redeeming quality about him. It is that he is one of the 4 pals with cooling level 3 and higher. So if you need cooling at all, this is definitely an easy pal to get for the job. Finally, breaking the trend of duos, we're going to be talking about Battalia. Now the cool thing about Battalia is that it can actually be obtained really easily. The way to obtain it is by breeding a Sweepa and a Ruby. It's honestly a pretty good pal to have, especially mid and early game. So if you don't want to catch the alpha and you don't want to go to the wildlife sanctuary, then breed for it. Why not? Now we're going to be talking about the best pal duo for watering and planting. I'm talking about Broncherry and Broncherry Aqua. Broncherry is definitely an easy catch. It spawns at a super low level in this region right here. And once you get yourself a Broncherry, you can also get a Broncherry Aqua by breeding a Broncherry with a Flack. Now Broncherry has a planting level 3, while Broncherry Aqua obviously has a watering level 3. This is why I say that they're definitely a good duo to use for watering and planting. I have never said Broncherry that many times in 30 seconds. Moving on from the pal I do not want to say the name of again, let's talk about Relaxosaurus and Relaxosaurus Lux. Now contrary to their non-scary appearance, these guys are actually very strong pals, and they're really easy to catch, especially early game. But speaking more specifically about just Relaxosaurus, it can be used to breed yourself an Orzhok or a Warsect. And apart from it looking like a giant stuffed animal, it's actually a dragon water type. Now onto Relaxosaurus Lux, there actually is a benefit to having that one. Apart from it being a dragon lightning type instead, it also has the ability to generate electricity, and it's really good at it, counting that it is one of 3 pals with level 3 or higher of generating electricity. Okay, now a more vicious looking pal. This is going to be Blazehow and Blazehow Noct. As for Blazehow, he is a stupid easy pal to obtain. This is because you can breed a Penking and a Malpaca, or a Serpent and a Celeray, and then you have a Blazehow. As for the Noct variant, he has a very good partner skill. His partner skill is called Dark Flame Lion, and apart from it obviously describing the pal, it gives you a higher drop rate from all neutral pals that it defeats. I'm going to try to make this really short for you guys. Thank you so much for making it out this far. If you liked so far, please like and subscribe. And also leave a comment down below. I respond to all of my comments. Alright, let's get back to the video. Moving on, we're talking about Cryolinks. This pal is rated an S tier pal in combat. And in all honesty, I would be afraid of this pal if it walked up to me. Like, let's be honest. Look at that thing. Just look at that thing. Apart from it looking like a Pokemon had a baby with Slenderman, it actually has some benefits in breeding. It can be used to make Suzaku and Warsect. Next up, we have a pal that I completely forgot existed up until I was making this video. And if you don't know this pal, I don't really blame you. This pal is Azrobe. It's more of an early game pal with the alpha being level 17. But if you want to go for a swim for whatever reason, this pal is ranked S tier as a swimming mount, which in my opinion is completely useless for traveling, but go for it. Here's another 2 pals you most likely will never use, or barely use at all. I'm talking about Kelpsy and Kelpsy Ignis. As for Kelpsy Ignis, he can be obtained from a Scorching Egg very easily, and there's not really anything special about him. Kelpsy, however, does have a partner skill that benefits the group somewhat. When Kelpsy is on your active team, it actually boosts the damage output of all the water types on your team. We are on 80 in the pal deck, and it is Alpha Dran and Alpha Dran Aqua. For Aqua, he unlocks a move that does 150 power. This move is a water move. As for the normal Alpha Dran, you have a 50% chance of getting him from a large dragon egg. Next up, we have Cyblix, and Cyblix can actually be used to obtain high quality cloth. This is done by putting him into a ranch where he will just sit there and produce the high quality cloth for you, and you have to do absolutely nothing. For our next pal, we have Violet. It's a really decent pal that can be obtained from buying it at the black marketeers. They usually tend to sell them at around 3k to 17k gold. Moving on, we have Verdash. If you're trying to get one, you can find them really commonly right above Volcano Island in the Wildlife Sanctuary. However, they do tend to spawn at a really high level, so another thing you could do is you could try to catch the boss, which spawns at a level 36. Up next, we'll be talking about Wixan and Catris. Both of these pals are 2 of the 3 pals that can drop high-grade technical manuals. Another thing is that Catris can drop Catris hair, which can be used to make a Catris hat. So if you want to rock around with that thing on your head, now you know how to get it. Moving away from the hats, we have the Firebird Ragnahawk. This pal is ranked A tier as a flying mount, A tier as a base pal, and also A tier as a combat pal. So it is definitely a pal to look out for and have. Going on to another bird, we have Beacon. For this pal, we have two facts that are pretty interesting. Fact number one is that if you kill an alpha beacon, it has a chance of dropping a legendary handgun schematic. Fact number two is that Beacon is the earliest flying PAL you can obtain that's rated an S tier mount. His saddle can be obtained at level 34. Now we have Bushi. He's the only fire PAL with 5 work suit abilities. It's definitely a good PAL to have at your base, especially if you need lumbering. Next up, we have Van Wyrm and Van Wyrm Christ. Both of these PALs are great for transporting things around the base. This is because their transportation is a level 3. It's also because they're flying PALs and they don't have to walk around things to get to their destination. Another fact about Van Wyrm Christ is that it's the only PAL that is both dark and ice type. On to PAL number 70 in the PAL deck, and also the best way to get flame organs, we're going to be talking about Flambell. If this PAL is left at a ranch, it will passively produce flame organs so that you don't have to go around and collect them yourself. Now for the meme PAL of Palworld, we have Lavander. Being PAL number 69 in the PAL deck, Lavander seems to be a gag PAL, which is also very noticeable in its appearance. I mean, just look at that thing. Next up, we're going to be talking about something a little bit more productive with Tombat. It's a great PAL to have early game at your base. This is because it has transporting 2, mining 2, as well as it works 24/7. And while we're on the subject of mining, we're going to be talking about Dig Toys. He's already great for mining ores, but his ability takes it another step further. This is because his ability allows him to more effectively destroy ore. Now we're going to be talking about Marath, and it only spawns in the icy part of the map at night with a rarity of 6 out of 10. Next up, we have Serpent and Serpent Terra. Starting off with Serpent Terra, even though it's a ground type, it also unlocks a dragon type move. As for the normal Serpent, it spawns in damp eggs, which spawn across the map really commonly. It's also a great PAL to have early game for watering. For our next duo, we have Dinosum and Dinosum Lux. Dinosum is the only PAL that is both dragon and grass type. As for its Lux variant, it has a chance of dropping tomato seeds, which are very good mid-game. Moving on from those two, we have Lunaris. This PAL, although it's a normal type, has the ability to learn an ice move that has 130 power, as well as an electrical move, which has 65 power. Onto a more interesting PAL, we have Daisy. While Daisy's an active PAL in your inventory, its ability allows it to shoot a lightning bolt after every attack that you do. And since we're talking about abilities, it's a great time to be talking about Kitsune. His ability pretty much voids out cold and hot temperatures in the environment while that PAL is being mounted. Another PAL with a great ability is Rayhound. Rayhound has an ability that pretty much enables you to double jump while you're mounted on that PAL. Rayhound is also ranked as an S tier as a ground mount. While we're on the subject of ground mounts, let's talk about Rangedrix. If you manage to get your hands on a Rangedrix with all of its possible passive skills, it would have a movement boost of 75%. Next up, we have Pyron and Pyron Noct. As for Pyron, he can be obtained from a large scorching egg. Those eggs are commonly found in the volcanic region. And if you have a Pyron Noct, it can be used to breed a Helsifier, a Ragnahawk, and even an Estagon. On to Foxsickles, he has the ability called Aura Guide. This ability pretty much empowers any ice pals and their moves. Moving on to Univolt. Univolt is one of the 2 pals that are the easiest pals to get, which are also ranked in S tier as ground mounts. Next up, we have Chalet or Chillet. Anyways, this PAL has a 3-way tie for lowest level alphas, as well as it's the lowest level dragon alpha in the game, so you should definitely catch this PAL as early as possible. Moving on, we have a duo that's not really a duo. It's Sui and Sweepa. With Sui, it's in a 6-way tie for the lowest possible HP per level. However, it does have a great effect on Sweepa. Now, Sweepa is actually ranked in SS tier in combat. Well, it was until it got changed while I was making this video. Now it's only ranked as a B in combat. But worry not, because of Sui's ability, there's actually a glitch that you can do for Sweepa. So go search it up and check it out. And a fun fact for Sweepa is that according to the Paldex, it can hide 101 Suis within its fur. That's really stupid. Next up, we have Grintails. For Grintails, I honestly couldn't find any very major facts. However, I did find one pretty cool fact. It's that when someone enters Grintail's territory, its eyes actually light up bright yellow. It's nothing major, but I think it's definitely something cool within the game. These next 2 pals pretty much go hand in hand. It's Beegard and Elizabeth. For B-Guard, he's really a do-all type of guy. He has a total of 7 different work suit abilities, as well as having the ability to produce honey whenever it's in the ranch. Unlike B-Guard, Elizabeth cannot produce honey and only has 5 work suit abilities. However, it is ranked 27th in base attack and defense per level. And you would think that this pal can actually produce more honey because it's the queen, but it can't. But I guess that technically makes sense if you really think about it. Now we've got the coolest looking monkey in the entire game. I'm going to be talking about Gory Rat. There's not a lot to be said about this pal apart from its sheer strength. It's really not that hard to get mid-game, as well as it being ranked number 3 for neutral type combat. Moving on, I'm going to be talking about Robin Quill and Robin Quill Terra. Both of these pals are very good to have at the base, having a lot of different suitabilities. They both have Handiwork 2, Lumbering 1, Medicine 1, Transporting 2, and Gathering 2, with the only difference being that Robin Quill has Planting 1. Since Robin Quill has so many work suitabilities, this is probably why he's ranked an S tier for a mid-game base pal. Another fun fact about Robin Quill and Robin Quill Terra is that supposedly they are both the secret bridge between humans and pals, which is kind of noticeable in both of their appearances. But anyways, let's move on to something that's definitely not human, but instead a bird. I'm going to be talking about Gale Claw. Now, even though this pal is a flying type and can also be mounted, it's not a flying mount. It's actually a gliding mount. As a gliding mount, Gale Claw is ranked an S tier. However, there is one drawback to mounting on this pal. If you run out of stamina mid-air, it does not matter, he will drop you, so just be cautious. Next up, we have a Loop Moon. It's a really cool looking pal, and if you're trying to obtain it, it can be very easily obtained by breeding a Dire Howl and a Celeray. They can also be bought from pal merchants and black marketeers, but if you're trying to just find them, they spawn pretty much on the entire center mass of the whole map, only at night. Now we have a pretty useless looking pal, but it's actually pretty useful. So there's actually 2 pals, it's Lispunk and Lispunk Ignis. Both of these pals have an ability to scan at least a 100 meter area for a nearby dungeon, which it also highlights for you. As for Lispunk Ignis, it unlocks a move that does 120 firepower, so that's definitely not too bad for a weak looking pal. Now, one cool thing we haven't seen throughout this whole game is the ability to teleport. Well, Cognito actually does have that ability. Although it is a bird and it can't fly and it also walks very slowly, it can teleport to its opponents, especially to do attack moves. Moving on, we have Dumud. While this pal is in your party, it increases your active ground pal's attack. This is due to its partner skill, which is called Soil Improver. That's a very weird name, but it makes sense. Next up, we have Arsox, and Arsox can be used to breed yourself an Anubis, which is an amazing pal to have, especially early game or mid game, or even late game. Another pal you can use for breeding other pals is Cinemoth. This pal can be used to breed a Broncherry, a Wumpo, and even a German Tide. For our next pal, we have Incineram and Incineram Noct. As for the Noct variant, it's ranked number 27 on base attack per level. Both of these pals are really good to obtain for early game combat. So if you want to obtain an Incineram, it can be caught at a very low level during occasional raids that happen on your base. Up next, we have our 39th pal in the pal deck. We have Ribbunny. This pal is one of the 6 pals that can drop an item called Beautiful Flowers. The main purpose of the Beautiful Flower is to make an item called a memory wiping medicine. And if you don't know what the memory wiping medicine is, essentially is a medicine that whenever you consume it, it resets all of a player's stats. Next up, we have the worst flying mount in the entire game. We're going to be talking about Nightwing. Nightwing has the earliest unlockable saddle for a flying mount. However, it is also the only flying pal that's rated as C for mounting. To further this, Nightwing's mount speed is 750, which is 50 lower than the next one on the list, and also happens to be the lowest one on the list. Now for Eiktherdir and Eiktherdir Terra, I hope that's how you pronounce those names because I don't even know. Anyways, when these pals are mounted, they can be used to double jump, as well as giving the players increased logging efficiency. Another thing you could use the Terra variant for is to breed it with a gum moss to produce a bee guard, which can be used to get honey. Another pal you could use for breeding is our next pal on the list, Melpaca. If you breed a Pen King with a Melpaca, you can get yourself a Blaze Howl. Apart from that, there's not really much else to this pal. However, for our next pal, we get an alternative to the Berry Plantation. The pal that gives you an alternative is Capriti. Capriti does this by shedding berries off of its back. However, it only does it whenever it's at a ranch. And since we're on the subject about food, it's a great time to talk about Woolly Pup. Woolly Pup produces cotton candy, Cotton candy is a food that does not expire. It also increases your hunger for quite a bit. And apart from that, it increases the sanity of any pal that you feed it to. So just like a pretty, if you leave a woolly pup in a ranch, it endlessly produces cotton candy for you. Now we have Mossanda and Mossanda Lux. Mossanda can be used to breed a Patalia, a Grisbold, Wumpo, and even Wumpo Botan. Both of these pals, however, whenever you mount them, you can use a grenade launcher that comes equipped with those pals. These grenade launchers actually do a lot of damage to anything that you shoot. And I do believe the only difference between these two grenade launchers is that Mossanda Lux's grenade launcher actually stuns or has a chance to stun the pals that it shoots as well. Now we have Hangyu and Hangyu Christ. Both of these pals can be used as gliders, and the higher their level, the better the glider becomes. However, both of these pals have a very dark backstory. So according to their pal deck entries, both of these pals back in the day were used to torture people. Now due to these pals having very long arms, they're actually very good at ripping things apart. So I think you know where this is going. Hangyu used to be used against criminals to rip the skin off of their bones, and Hangyu Christ used to be used for the sinners who got their hair ripped off of their skull. But anyways, let's move on from that tragedy and talk about Gobfin and Gobfin Ignis. For these pals, I honestly couldn't find anything interesting about them. However, Gobfin only spawns in one little section of the map, while Gobfin Ignis apparently developed its Ignis by burning many calories. Yeah, that's what I uncovered. So if you want to have cool fire magical powers, I guess you got to get to the gym. And I mean, we're already on these really weird facts, so I guess let's talk about Bristla and its crush. Now, I would read exactly why I think that it has a crush on Cinemoth, but for certain reasons, I am not going to read what it says in the PAL deck. So if you guys want to know, go read the PAL deck for this thing. Now for our next one, we have more of a fun fact. It's for Mazzarina. And as you guys might know, Mazzarinas are the only pal that produce milk, which is used for cakes, which you use for breeding. But what you guys might not know is that regardless of Mazzarina's gender, either male or female, both produce milk. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't ever want to milk a bull. Okay, let's talk about something a little bit more productive. Let's talk about Floppy and its drop. So whenever you either kill or capture a Floppy, it has a chance of dropping low-grade medical supplies as well as wheat, which you can use for plantations. Okay, now for one of the abilities that does the most damage in the whole game that I have come across. This ability belongs to Toko Toko. The ability is called Mega Implode, and it does a power of 250. However, as the name implies, the POW literally implodes. Now, as I stated before, there's two POWs that are ranked S tiers as ground mounts, one of them being Univolt, and the other one is actually our next one on the list, which is Dire Howl. This PAL is extremely easy to catch, and in my opinion, even easier to catch than Univolt, and also extremely fast as a ground mount. But honestly, why would you stick to the ground if you can get yourself a Celeray really early game and use him as a glider? So if you get yourself a Celeray and you use his ability called Sapphire Glider, you can pretty much just glide around really early game. For our next PAL, we have a great way to passively produce gold. We have Maui and Maui Christ. And I bet you guys can guess it. If you release these guys on a ranch, they passively produce gold for you, non-stop. However, above that, Maui Christ actually comes with the added bonus of cooling level 1. So if you need to produce money and also need the occasional cooling, there you go. Now we have the parasite of all parasites, Killamari. Killamari is one of the 5 pals that is a dungeon exclusive pal. This means that it only spawns in a dungeon naturally. Okay, so even though this pal may look like a nice little hat, do not put this pal on your head, because this pal is actually known for sucking the organs out of every single one of its victims by placing itself on top of its head. Yeah, even though it's cute, this guy's a little bit messed up in the brain. Moving on to our next pal, we have Fuddler. This pal is pretty much just a walking effect bonus for all players at the base. Now the reason I say this is because Fuddler has the ability to unlock a lot of different passive skills that pretty much just benefit the player. Some of the passive skills include 10% increase to players' attack, a 25% increase to players' logging efficiency, 25% increase to players' work speed, 25% increase to players' mining, and even 10% increase to players' defense while it's at the base. For our next pal, we have the Nox. This pal can be used alongside Ecthyrdeer to breed a Violet, which only spawns on a wildlife sanctuary. Now we're getting into our more basic pals, and we're also on our 20th pal on the pal deck, Rushor. Now, regardless of this pal's size or strength, he actually picks a fight with literally anything, no matter what. Next up, we have the pal Daydream, and Daydream gives you the ability to have 5 pals out and active at the exact same time. The only catch is that you have to have only Daydreams out at the same time, apart from one pal. Moving on, we have Cremis, and Cremis has the ability to have the passive skill Artisan, which gives it a 50% work speed boost. Onto our next pal, we have Depresso. And a fun fact about Depresso is that it was actually a pal that was named by the community during a Name This Pal event hosted by Palworld. Now we have Tfent, and Tfent has the ability to heal the player. Its ability is called Soothing Shower, and it actually increases depending on the level of the Tfent. For our 15th pal in the pal deck, we have Hoocrates, and Hoocrates is one of 3 pals that can drop a high grade technical manual. There's not anything else that's really special about this pal. However, it is a nocturnal pal, which means it only spawns at night and it can work 24/7. For our next pal, we have a very, very interesting pal. This pal is Vixie. Now, most people know that if you put a Vixie into a ranch, it can actually drop pal balls. However, most people don't know that if you condense 16 Vixies into one Vixie, it becomes a 3-star Vixie, meaning that it drops Mega Spheres instead of Pal Spheres. For another interesting pal, we have Gummoss. So Gummoss has a secret special variant that cannot be bred, and it can only be found in the same locations that Gummoss spawns. This variant is actually called a special flower Gummoss. And as its name implies, this Gummoss spawns with a red flower on top of its head. Apart from that, if you kill or capture this Gummoss, it actually drops a flower. The flower it drops is the flower I spoke about a little bit before. It's called the Beautiful Flower. Moving on, we have Jolthog and Jolthog Christ. Jolthog Christ can only be obtained by breeding it, finding eggs, or purchasing it from the merchant. As for Jolthog, even though it is such a weak pal, supposedly it can produce a shock that reaches 10 million volts. I don't know how, but that's what the pal deck says. However, if you really think about it, that kind of makes sense because you can use both of these pals as essentially grenades to explode your opponents. Onto the best pal for breeding, we're going to be talking about Penking. This pal can be used to breed so many different pals in the game, but I'm actually not going to be talking about that. Instead, I'm just going to be talking about a little fun fact about him. Regardless, here's some pals that it can make. Anyways, a fun fact about Penking is that it is both weak and strong against fire types. The reason being is because it is an ice and water type pal. Moving on to the pals that pretty much worship Penking, I'm going to be talking about Pengullet. Now, Pengullet can be shot out of a cannon, and under the pal deck, it says it is pretty much Pengullet's way of attempting to fly, but his attempt to fly is pretty much our way of free ammunition, so I'll take it. Finally, we are on to single digits and on to our 9th pal in the pal deck. This pal is going to be Ruby. For Ruby, we have more of a fun fact. So the fun fact is that according to the pal deck, Ruby eats 1 piece of burnt branch a day, and doing this actually gives it eternal life. So if you guys want eternal life, just start munching on some trees. Moving on, we have Tansy, and Tansy can be equipped with a rifle, and I don't know if that reminds you guys of anything, but it definitely reminds me of something. Now the pal we have is Sparkit, and Sparkit actually learns a move that it is weak against. This move is a ground move, and since it is a lightning type, then obviously there you go. For our pal that sounds like a curse word, we have Thwack, and he can actually be used with a Broncherry to breed yourself a Broncherry Aqua. On to our 5th pal in the pal deck, we have Fox Sparks. Fox Sparks is the first pal you unlock that can be weaponized. He becomes a flamethrower and is unlocked at level 6. Next up, we have Liftmonk. Apart from having statues that are based after him, Liftmonk can also be equipped with an SMG. Moving on, we have Chickapee, and a fun fact about Chickapee is that this pal can only be breeded by using itself. Apart from that, it is also the only pal that drops eggs when at a ranch, and you need those for cakes, so get to it. With our 2nd pal in the pal deck, we have Kativa, and Kativa is the earliest pal that you can get that increases your max weight when it's in your team. finally, onto our 137th pal, and also our last pal, we have Lamball. One special thing about Lamball is that it is the only pal that can learn Roly-Poly, and honestly, you don't want any other pals to learn this move because it is utterly useless. Another fact about Lamball is that Lamball cannot be made in breeding by breeding two of the same pals. So essentially you can't breed a Lamball and a Lamball and get a Lamball. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe or check out some of my other videos. See ya!